Welcome back. It's that time of week once again. The Duval dive in full effect. And listen, people that want to call things the offseason, there's still plenty to talk about here. Of course, there's a great opportunity to continue to get more Jacksonville Jaguar information here on the Duval dive. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game, with Jaguar Report, and my man, the man who I call champion, Travis Holmes of Big Cat Country. What's going on, my man?
I like being considered a champion. It makes me feel good. I appreciate you on this Friday morning, sir.
Considered a champion, sir. We earned a championship being flag football teammates. I think I'm counting it. I don't care what the world thinks.
That is one way of looking at it. I appreciate it. This is good.
That's my way of looking at it. And of course, listen, I know that you are a champion bringing things out on bigcatcountry.com on a regular basis. Honor, joy, and privilege to have you aboard. Honor, joy, and privilege to have everybody aboard who is watching or will be looking here shortly on the podcast. Travis, listen, I'm going to get into this, and there was a lot of great conversation that I had on the Student of the Game podcast, as a matter of fact. Bing! I felt like on the national picture, the Jacksonville Jaguars offseason is not getting enough national buzz in general. Not so much for what was good or bad per se, but there's just been a lot of compelling movement that's very interesting for football people in general. And yet all I'm hearing about is like aged out receivers finding new homes to try to bring new life, or Joe Flacco, trying to go teach Anthony Richardson chess, which, I mean, that's all fun and all, but listen, right. I mean, basically all three levels of the defense had a conversation. A lot of elements of the offense that weren't quarterback or running back had conversation, and there's just been a lot of movement in pieces. And of course, any opportunity to bring Trent Baalke into the national limelight for what he's doing right or wrong is more compelling football NFL conversation. So I took that opportunity to do that on the Student of the Game to talk about the Jags and other teams with News 4 Jax sports anchor Jamal St. Cyr. So I just wanted to say, what I want to ask you, am I right in my assessment that the Jags offseason is the most mobile in the NFL this year?
I would say for a team you expect to be at minimum average to above average, because the range of outcomes for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024, let's be clear, it is a wide range.
That is a wide net. You're right. Yeah.
Right. This thing could crash and burn and be a 4 or 5 win team, which I don't see happening, but I can acknowledge that the fact is that's a non-zero sum of outcome. Like that exists.
A worst case scenario.
That's a worst case scenario for sure. But then they could also be a team that is in the AFC Championship, potentially, fighting for that knockout punch chance to be in the Super Bowl. Is that realistic? But is it possible? Absolutely. And that's the piece that makes this so interesting. And also probably why the national media guys are just staying the heck away from it. They don't know what to make of it. They either hate the Jaguars, or they are, they're the Nick Wrights of the world and they love the Jaguars, and there's no in between right now. So they're just like, hey, hands off. We don't like Trent, so we're going to just focus on that all off season.
Yeah, nothing's moving with the prince that was promised. So Nick Wright is not interested. No, I get it.
Right.
Well, and I think a central point of it, we've talked about it plenty on this show. It's been talked about plenty throughout the Jag sphere, if you will, amongst the Duval devout. I just on any other podcasts, other people we appreciate, including Jamal, including T Wiggs, of course, we got to mention Gus and John because it's our job, Big Cat Country and Jaguar Report. I will say, from selfishly, I find it very interesting how relevant my articles talking about T. Higgins and L'Jarius Sneed still have a little bit of weight to them, potentially. Bing! Even though mention of Calvin Ridley is now officially obsolete. But then also, I would be remiss to not give you a bing in your own right for talking about the latest with Everbank Stadium and what's going on with that and the updates to that too. So make sure you check out Big Cat Country for my guy Travis and his writings with that, as well as things that will be involved on the field. But let me open the first question of this, because I think this is a very interesting philosophical debate in our show, such as it's made up with you and me, an offensive guy and a defensive guy. The draft, the primary target between which side of the trenches is more important? What's more important to draft early for the Jags this season, Travis? Is the offensive line or the defensive line?
This was literally this is a conversation I have had with so many people over this past week of free agency, and I think it's because the free agents, the big deals are already done. So now we're starting to get into that conversation of what free agent guys should we maybe be signing to fill those small depth holes and things of that nature, because we want to be able to draft this offensive guy or that defensive guy or whatever. Like, so now we're getting into these philosophical debates. Where do you see this Jacksonville Jaguars team being elite in this upcoming season? So many people many of the Duval devout kind of have the feeling that we should support Trevor, give him that number one that he's been looking for, because whether you're Tua from the Miami Dolphins, whether you're Jalen Hurts, whether you're Josh Allen, et cetera, all these guys, Herbert from the Chargers, all these guys have had their number ones or just an amazing wide receiver core, and the Jaguars, even when we have a quote unquote good receiver core, is always have these major blemishes. So most people, I would say, that I've come across have agreed, hey, give Trevor that number one. Let's truly find out what he is, because he's already on that fourth year of his contract. Give him that guy, give him that dude, and let's see what we truly have right now. And I can't argue with that. However,
However,
I'm a DB guy. I remember 2017. I remember the fact that when the team has those blemishes and has those needs, that they've shown that they can't necessarily be an elite offense, but they can be a really good one. How you might need that defense to be elite. So I don't disagree with the argument that, hey man, maybe you need to go and get that cornerback, because that cornerback room right now, it absolutely needs another guy. In my opinion, it actually needs two guys, but
I
that's
agree with that too, by the way.
another conversation we just haven't been having in these circles. Uh, Maybe like I can understand the argument on both sides, but again, I lean defense because I'm a defense guy. But I won't argue with someone if they say, "Hey, give me that number one, give me that receiver."
Well, that's why I set the question to be specific to the trenches, because with receiver or DB, you could have several philosophical debates, but like,
But I think we're more solid, at least based on the free agency addition of Arik Armstead, based on the fact that we still have Josh Allen, we still have Trevon Walker, we have Devon Hamilton, hopefully being closer to his 2022 self, and Roy Harrison as an alternative, to move in and out of that defensive tackle role. Because we have that, I don't feel as urgent a need to get that additional guy in the first round. It'd be great, don't get me wrong, but I
yeah,
don't feel the need of the pressure to get that guy in the first round on the defense. However, I would feel that pressure for the interior offensive line, maybe even the tackle situation with Walker Little and Cam Robinson, however that shakes out.
yeah, no, and I agree entirely with that point. I mean, listen, Eric Armstead and I mean, Josh Allen's here for now, and he's franchised. You know, he obviously he's not signed the contract. You and I make a lot of assumptions. Totally get it, but none of us saw the Titans coming to claim Calvin Ridley either. But I digress. And then
Fair.
listen, I really think the opportunity to see Trayvon Walker really blow up is wrought, if you will, by the arrival of Armstead, no question. You know, if my Niner fanhood makes me bias in that direction, so be it. But I believe that that's a big impact. And if you don't believe me, Jamal St. Cyr said the same on the Student of the Game podcast earlier in the week. Bing! So, with all that in mind, I would agree in this instance with the trenches in particular that the offensive side's more important, even though they've taken the time to secure, air quotes, the contracts of guard people. We don't necessarily think that's meant to necessarily keep them as starters per se. Yeah. But it's something that they're still in the building about their contracts were restructured. And moreover, I think the biggest tell is you have the outside and the bookends for the defensive line accounted for the edge rush. They've addressed the interior, even though my heart will always beat for Falaransu Fatukasi as a guy who I like to watch play football. I acknowledge Eric Armstead as a significant upgrade. The fact that they haven't gotten they did upgrade the center spot with Moses
Morris.
as well.
Yeah.
or Morse, excuse me. I have to acknowledge that too, right? But the fact that it's a veteran guy that they went in to go get, and that tackle position, as you refer, is still kind of up in the air, and will be even more so after next year, right? Because I
Correct.
believe that's when this is a contract year for Cam Robinson.
Yes.
The likelihood and I think the necessity of an offensive lineman over a defensive lineman at this time is more important. That being said, I would be fascinated if, let's say, the first round of the draft, obviously there's going to be a run on quarterbacks. There always is. But Mel Kiper and his third draft board pointed out, and I'm not saying I worship Mel Kiper. This is more to demonstrate the point that there's actually, he's expecting a run on offensive linemen after the top three receiver prospects go.
Right.
And if that happens, well, then just snag best available. Mel Kiper has, for example, the DB out of Alabama on his board at 17. But if they went with a solid edge rusher that fell to them at that pick, how do you say no?
Right. You're talking to Dallas Turner or Jared Verse.
For example. I mean, if Verse could come back to North Florida, bruh, you're going to tell me a team, by the way, that for the same reason brought in Tim Tebow for a for a preseason doesn't have that on the back of their mind? Nah, if Verse is there, I don't think he will be. If Verse is there, they're taking him straight up.
You're not wrong, and this was it did happen on the watch of this GM, which is weird, but yeah, that did happen. But I'm not even fully out. That's the weirdest part about this whole free agency and this whole draft situation with the Jaguars is I'm not truly fully out on anybody. And it's rare that we've been drafting in the middle of the first round because this is that old school Indianapolis Colts range where when they had Andrew Luck and Peyton and they would always not be necessarily the best team in the league, but they're just right in that sweet spot where you have no idea who's going to fall to where. Like you can get the general range, but you're just really hoping.
Pick 6, it gets real unpredictable.
Right. So now it puts us into a spot that we're just having conversations about all these guys and you don't really know what's going to happen there. So like if someone like a Brock Bowers ends up falling, I'm not necessarily out to say that they're not going to draft a tight end just because they drafted a tight end last year.
Have a major deal with one and Evan Ingram out there already.
Right. Too. I'm not necessarily out saying that they wouldn't draft a Dallas Turner or Jared Verse, even though they have Josh Allen and Walker. I don't know. I'm not out necessarily even saying that they wouldn't draft JPJ because he's a swing center and tackle, swing center and guard.
A great call out, by the way. Speaking of swing players, I would argue Walker being the other bookend only furthers the argument to augment your edge rush because then you could kick Walker inside and have him do some real damage as a player. Sure, the stats may not jump off the sheet, but he can be a major impact on the inside as well with Eric Armstead, and you can move him around to confuse guys. And if he has fewer sacks this year, he's in less of a negotiating position against the franchise. See, I'm going, where's my tinfoil hat, Travis?
I just had this literally last night. And I mean 10 to 11 o'clock last night, had this argument in one of the Twitter spaces, Travis D. Holmes on Twitter, also FYI. We just had this argument at like 10 or 11 o'clock last night with a group of Jaguar fans talking about this exact thing of, hey, if this defense looks better, Josh Allen all of a sudden doesn't hit that 17 sack, range that we just hadn't seen from him until this contract year. And all of a sudden he's around, let's say 9 sacks, but the pressure's generally around the same area. And maybe Walker, because it's being a little bit more spread out with that internal pressure that you're getting from Armstead now. And all of a sudden, yes, he's in a less negotiable position, but do you think he's actually taking a cent less money, even being in less of a negotiable position because anybody else that's out there will still give that guy the bag? And that's the piece that makes this weird, ugly, messy, whatever you want to call it. It really does come down to how the Jaguars season would go. Because if they defense looks great, offense looks okay in their first round playoff and out kind of situation, I'm not sure that they give him the bag still at that point.
Or even worse, let's say the defense struggles, but they still are in top 5 in sacks or something like that. And it is obvious that DB core, who you said needs at least 2 more players, I agree with that, by the way, is exposed like Janet Jackson in a halftime show. That would only increase his value.
That would increase his value, and that would leave it where there's no middle ground that the team and the athlete would probably be able to reach, and that's the part that's the point that you never want to reach. Um, I don't know where to go from there. Like that's a weird spot to be in for all parties involved.
So, and we talked about this. We talked about this going into the show, and I referenced the Student of the Game episode with Jamal St. Cyr. Bing.
Really good show.
Thank you, sir. Props to him too. Excellent guest. The question I posed to him to close the show was there are 3 days in the draft. Now the Jags have more than 3 needs, and maybe it's possible that they find a way to fulfill starters at all of the needs and Trent Baalke hits a home run in the draft. Also, I believe there is a statistical chance that you can find a lost lottery ticket and become a billionaire. The punchline is this, though, Trev. Let's say that the powers that be come to you in a vision, in a dream, and they say unto you, I can guarantee you will get a starter in all 3 days of the draft. What position for each day do you think would come from those drafts?
So I watched your interview with Jamal live, and I agreed with a few of his answers, but I'm not that guy. We're not agreeing with all answers. So I'm going.
I'm okay. Hey, listen, on the very show in question, he even Jamal said, hey, I could do a kicker for the 3rd round, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah, you don't want to give the easy answer. I respect that.
Which is my ease. That is the correct answer for this team. Just the FYI. And I'm happy he didn't take the easy out while I was still acknowledged. Probably could have. Because Joey Sly, who the Jaguars just recently signed to a 1-year deal for like $1 million, and he had like 25,000 guaranteed. That screams we're going to need another kicker because this is going to be a competition between him and the guy we just signed, who we previously traded away in Riley Patterson. And that's who the current competition is going to be between, both of whom are not as good as Brandon McManus, who we just lost in free agency. So all that to say is maybe we're at the point where we probably should be drafting a kicker. FYI. I wrote about this in the 2024 NFL free agencies Jaguar signings tracker on Big Cat Country. Take a look at that. I actually have a thread that actually compares the stats for long range kicking, short range kicking, and extra points of all 3 kickers.
Look at this guy breaking down kickers. Next level ish.
Hey man, I'm just letting everybody know. Everybody thinks that one person's better than the other, and this and that and this and this, and I'm just having a conversation on what do the numbers say. So all that to say, we have probably we have a great need for a kicker on the 3rd day. So if they were able to get a 6th round kicker or a 5th round kicker, something along those lines, you'll never hear me complaining because we've had that need for way too long. Also, I actually did agree with him, and I can't change this answer on getting a slot cornerback like someone like Mike Sandersill from Michigan. If you can get that guy on that, on that 3rd round range, something along those lines, because I don't think he's going to the 4th round. Some people have him dropping there. I just personally don't believe it. Because of that, I would probably say he's that day 2 guy who we have that opening right now for. And as weird as it is, I know people are going to hate me. I kind of don't care.
About that now.
Kind of don't care. I'm saying 1st round, we got to go cornerback. I'm thinking cornerback 1st round, outside cornerback. I'm thinking nickelback in something along that 3rd round compensatory pick range, and kicker 3rd day, and maybe even get that starting wide receiver. We might go 4 out of 4. We might get a starting wide receiver in the 2nd round. Let's see if we can figure that piece out.
And the wide receiver at the 2nd round thing isn't necessarily a bad call by per se. For me, I have the very distinct feeling, especially in an offseason where so many it feels like a lot of experienced receivers have moved around, that other people will be looking for that gap fill. Just as an example, I feel like the Vikings are still scrambling to replace Adam Thielen alongside Justin Jefferson. Hell, the Chargers lost 2 receivers, so they may be a threat for a good portion, upper portion of the draft for receivers. It just there's been a lot of movement to that end where guys are necessary. And, Calvin Ridley, of course, being another example of a guy that moved and left the franchise is what
Right.
cited the Jaguars need. I can't front on that. So
As the contracts for all these roles keep getting more and more and more in the NFL free agency, and and for the extensions to keep these guys, then that's going to result in those draft picks for those corresponding positions to start moving up. So you used to be able to get, those interior O linemen and centers and things of that nature in the third, maybe even the late third, early fourth round.
yeah.
But because the free agency, those contracts are starting to get up there, those guys might start slipping down to that second to early third range. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, yeah, and so all of a sudden, just because of the value of free agency, it's like, oh no, these guys are getting more important to get cheaper, and they're starting to be treated more like we would treat those slot cornerbacks, those even the cornerbacks. And that's a very interesting thing to me that's kind of happening in free agency that I think may end up impacting the draft.
And it will. Now, granted, part of that increase is due to the fact that the salary cap's increased. So there's kind of a tide rising all the ships concept there. But if you're a team out there who's in, a very tough cap situation, your Kansas City Chiefs, your New Orleans Saints, that opportunity for savings is entirely and incredibly real. I don't think anybody's gonna what's his word, push the envelope on you for wanting to find that opportunity for savings in a rookie starter at any position. So I
Right.
think it's a fantastic point you bring up over and above the market, the salary market overall shifting. And so it's interesting. Now running backs, even their value, I feel like is air quotes increasing. It's not a full correction, but let's just put it this way: that salary cap increase is led to a lot of people a lot of running backs getting $8 million per year or more. I think that may eventually price Travis Etienne out of the building potentially, but we'll worry about that in offseason 25 and 6.
Unless you have a quarterback who's going to put his line in the sand for his running back and say you have to have him, which I just don't see happening.
That's not
Like,
true.
I don't see it happening, and because of that, outside of something as extreme as that, I don't know how they don't just pick up that fifth year option and let him go.
Yeah, I think the fifth year is what'll happen to myself. But so in the world of things that are amazing, DB guy says DB twice in the answer. Okay, cool.
Yes, that's unfortunately I feel that is the correct answer. Unless we see this team end up picking up one of these other free agent cornerbacks who are out there right now. Whether you're talking about someone like I don't know, Rock Sin, and that's not necessarily for your starting depth. That's just for your competition, just to make sure you have a guy who can at least be reasonable. Stephon Gilmore, whoever it may be. That way you just have guys who are there. Unless I see something that takes place like that before the draft, I doubt that they wouldn't be going cornerback in those first few rounds. I just can't see it just looking at that depth chart. I think even John Shipley at Jaguar Report, your boss, said something similar a few weeks ago. It's just like, hey, look at the Jaguars depth chart as in the secondary, and you tell me how you see them not drafting a DB early.
Hey, listen, you heard me pounding the table last year for Joey Porter Jr. Okay, so you ain't got to sell me hard on that. Just saying.
But I would have been a fan of that pick, as you know.
But I'll add this: my answer is conditional, and I said this in the IOW Sports Network that I guested on Monday. They asked me who I think the Jags should get at 17. My response is, whatever position goes on a run leading up to pick 17, you don't pick that one, right? You suspend it for a round, okay? Now, if Mel Kiper is correct, for example, and there's a run on offensive tackles and linemen, and Jared Verse is off the table, then you obviously go corner. I'm with that.
Yeah.
I don't know that happens here. Okay. I don't see that happening here. I think because the offensive line draft is one of the other pieces that are the tackles are perceived as being deep, like receivers are in this one, regardless of how deep they really are or not. I don't want to go off on that tangent again, but like, if with the tackles being seen as deep in this draft, I think that's fewer teams that will pick up in the upper first, middle first rounds. I think that's something that will leave a really big opening. And in my mind, um, that sets the table for the Jags to get a big man there. However, here's where I live, Travis Holmes. I feel like me that this isn't necessarily a corner deep draft. At least that's not what you've been hearing.
I don't disagree.
All the more reason to solidify the corner being a day one pick, in my opinion.
Thank you for agreeing.
Yeah, well, we definitely are. And despite my beefiness, now staying away from the beef even still, because the point that you made earlier when we were talking was that receiver is deep, but not as deep as everyone thinks.
Mm-hmm.
If you've passed on it on day one and you don't get one in round two, they probably will and should. If the Jags draft opens round one corner, round two wide receiver, I think that's a great pairing.
Right.
But the second day starter I want to see come out is a receiver, especially if they don't get one in round two. Should they do so, I would capitulate to at that point having a tackle. Day three, anything defense. I would prefer the edge rusher depth be augmented. You get a guy like, snap. And Abdullah, we haven't seen yet. I got to keep remembering that.
After injuries, yeah.
If Abdullah, recovering from injury, does really well, a la Travis Etienne as the running back, right? If you're banking on that happening, then that's when you get your beef.
Well, I'm of the opinion that at this point, don't bank on anything. That is my opinion right now. Is because at this current moment in time, in all the conversations that I've had with all the Duvals about that I've spoken with, but the thing I always walk away with is everyone is playing this with these thin margins. And what I mean is everyone is saying, hey, we don't have a hole in this position because we have so and so. We don't have a hole in this position because we have so and so. Or these are the main positions that we have holes in. We have to do this, and this. And I'm like, all right, so you're building your whole team to have no depth. Or you're building your whole team to say, I'm going to fill this and this and this, but what happens if this person gets injured or that person gets injured? You're basically building your whole team to say, we are one Morris injury from having Luke Fortner be our starting center for the vast majority of 2024. I'm not comfortable with that. Like,
hey, I'll throw that back at you. How much DB depth was necessary last year? Personally, I think the injuries at the DB core are the biggest reason the Jags didn't make the playoffs throughout the course of the season. There's at least 2 games I could point to that would have been wins with a starting DB core that was contributing to the Jags being the top in turnovers for how many weeks in the NFL? Everyone seems to have forgotten this, Travis Holmes.
I think we all forget a lot of the stuff, and everybody just looks at coaching and the quarterback and everything, and in this case, the center also, because he was really bad. But outside of that, yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Because those coverage busts that we had like 4 weeks in a row, you're 1 to 2 touchdowns in multiple games from having that one game difference of being in the playoffs. Like, that is literally the margin that we're talking about. So I'm a fan of building a truly competitive team, not making assumptions about what's going to happen and who's going to fall into what spot. You get all the guys you can get. You let them fight it out in training camp, and whatever happens with that team, it happens with that team. But you have a more competitive unit, and the boat rises for everyone. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and especially I think, and here's the other reason why I as much as I joked at your expense earlier of the DB picking DBs for 2 of the days, you're going in 10 toes down that the AFC South is becoming a pass-based division, and that is a huge deal in my mind.
Right.
A lot of attention needs to be paid for that, which is why we brought up Jared Verse earlier. If he's the guy at 17 that's there, get that and just get him.
Yes, all that. Yes, get him. At the end of the day, you have a defensive coordinator you just brought in who's supposed to be playing a lot of heavy man and heavy man match coverages. Who's hopefully going to be that guy to help stop that C.J. Stroud, Kyle Shanahan type of offense. That's hopefully going to be able to slow down the Indianapolis Colts and the, I guess, maybe high-flying Tennessee Titans offense. Whatever that's supposed to be.
Let's not engage. We'll say the big swinging, heavy punching mayonnaise Messiah offense. Yes.
Yes. Whatever that's supposed to be. So you have a defensive coordinator you brought in that's supposed to be able to do that. But then now you need the guys that's going to be able to run with that. Cool. Where are they? You show me those, and we'll have a real conversation that at least have an adequate average to above average defense, so that you give your offensive chance to not have to score 40 points a game.
Moreover, I would argue this too. All the accent on the past that exists in the AFC South, what is the one commonality among the quarterbacks? You could argue, except maybe Trevor, but nah, I still think that Trevor qualifies with this adjective. All of them are young, period.
Young and mobile.
There you go. I mean, I guess Levis is mobile-ish, but he ain't there. He ain't there to run the football. I know that ish. But anyways, I'll leave that mic drop there to wrap this show up here. Travis, tell the world where you can be found, my guy.
Man, 30 minutes already.
You're welcome.
You can find me on all the socials, Travis D. Holmes. You can find my writings covering the Jacksonville Jaguars on BigCatCountry.com. You can find me here every Friday, 11:15 to 30 a.m. Wherever you catch your podcast, the Duval Jaguars
When it's
podcast.
not spring break, it'll be 11. I can assure you
that. And also, you can find me with the South Florida Tribune on the Sports Exchange and Inside the Pigskin on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 p.m.
Excellent stuff. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as the student of the game. Check out my writings with the Jaguar Report, the 3-point conversion, and the black and gold banneret, as well as my work with the Orlando Magic for A7BN Sports. And of course, the student of the game podcast during the week, Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. You'll see it streaming and this as well on Sertoba Media's or Huddle Up's YouTube channel, as well as on, I have a Twitch page. Look at this. Yeah. I'm 40. I have a Twitch. Check that out. That usually sounds like a medical condition. And then, of course, on the A7BN Sports, the Student of the Game Facebook pages, as well as on Twitter. So for my guy, Travis Holmes, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. An honor, joy, and privilege to bring it to you for another week. But until next time, everyone, class dismissed.